Welcome back to another episode of Fire, Flour, and Fur. My husband has done a couple of episodes, and we have done a couple of really fun episodes where we did the baking challenge, where we invited family. I guess they're sort of family, aren't they? Friends, neighbors, co-workers over to help judge. And my husband suggested that maybe I just do a recipe on my own. It is January, so we have just finished all of the holiday baking, and of course that's what I do. I bake. I love it. So the recipe that I'm doing, I'm cutting in half because in this recipe it claims that it's going to make 250 cookies. Now, mind you, my cookies are generally much larger than the ones in the recipe, but still in all, I'm not really wanting 250 cookies. So that's what we're doing today. The recipe that we're doing is a recipe for Cowboy Cookies. I know that this is a popular recipe for a lot of different people, and Cowboy Cookies are very similar to other recipes where there is a wide range of things that people put in. You get used to what you like. These are the ones that we like. They're pretty simple. Flour, butter, brown sugar, granulated sugar, oatmeal, cinnamon, allspice, chocolate chips, eggs, vanillas, nuts, baking powder, soda, and salt. Pretty simple. Some people put raisins in theirs. My husband claims that there is no such thing as a good raisin. I laughed about it until one day when I had purchased a really nice bag of granola and came home to a bag of raisins and nothing else because he had picked every single raisin out. He says that the only thing worse than a raisin is a cooked raisin. And there's that whole joke about how raisins and cookies are when people think that they're chocolate chips are why people have trust issues. So no raisins in this one. When we were talking about this recipe earlier, and I'm sure you can hear sweet little Anne in the background. Hi, sweetie. She usually accompanies me in the kitchen, which means I am stepping over her the whole time I'm doing stuff. She's at the moment not here, but I can guarantee at some point she will be. Her brother's outside playing. So when we were talking about this recipe and we were discussing allspice, I always want to know where stuff comes from. So I had to look it up. Interestingly enough, allspice came to Spain with Christopher Columbus. Intriguing. Christopher Columbus didn't know what pepper was, and he picked up allspice thinking that it was black pepper. So when it is dried, when the little fruit berries are dried, they harden up and they actually look like peppercorns. But they have a little bit different feel. It's an interesting spice that people use in both sweet and savory things. In savory things, it actually gives a sweet, and then when you put it in sweet things, it's a homey, warm, which I think is why it works in Cowboy Cookies with oatmeal. It's this homey, warm. It's not an overpowering spice necessarily, but it I don't know, maybe it's because we've eaten it so much, we're used to it, but it's a really good traditional, nothing too exotic spice. So we are using allspice today. I have mentioned this in previous videos, but I like to use the paddle for recipes like this. For the longest time in my brain, I would use the whisk, and the paddle, of course, is much better when you actually think about the whole process. Okay, the first thing that this recipe calls for, again, this is halved, is 1 cup of butter. So 2 sticks of butter, and we are going to be creaming this. So creaming means that you are putting softened butter. So this is real butter. It's not margarine. You can use margarine, but let's be honest. If you're going to make baked goods, you want to go with butter. Real butter. Come on. This is unsalted. My husband and I have gotten to the point where we always, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time we use unsalted because then we can control. And then if we decide that we want to put more salt in later, we can. All right, so this says combine butter, eggs, brown sugar, granulated sugar, and vanilla. Now, that's all it says, but from past experience, I know that I want to put my butter and my sugar in together and cream it, which means mix it together until it becomes this nice, fluffy texture, and then I'm going to put my other stuff in. So, it calls for 1 cup of granulated sugar and 1 cup of brown sugar. You can use light brown or dark brown sugar. We, at our house, love, for the most part, dark brown. We keep light brown and dark brown in our cupboard, but for this, I am using dark brown. It has a bit more of a molasses. Do you know the difference, babe, between light brown and dark brown in the process? It does taste a bit more molasses. To me, it's just a richer flavor, and it's just my preference. But again, light brown, dark brown, that's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and mix the butter, brown sugar, and granulated sugar together. Start out slow because I am the queen of flinging crap everywhere. So I'm going to start out slow until we get a little bit combined, and then turn it up. And in my previous video, I've always joked around about this. They say cream it together, and you look at it and say, oh, that looks combined. Yeah, it's combined. It's not cream. Sometimes, depending on the ratio of butter to sugar, you have to put eggs in for them to really start to cream. Okay. That is, I'm sorry, what?
Rule number 1.
Oh, yeah, my husband reminded me. Always scrape the bowl. Always scrape the bowl. Good old spatula. I don't need to scrape the bowl yet. I'm going to put 2 eggs in, one at a time. The whole egg. And when these have combined, then I will scrape the bowl. And those are large eggs. 2 large eggs. And that, you're starting to see a good cream. Now this is what I'm going to scrape the bowl. Because you can see, and I see if I can get both pieces. This part has not combined yet. You can see that it's darker and it's not quite as fluffy looking. This part is more combined, and if you don't scrape the bowl, then you get these chunks of this less combined stuff, and your cookie or your cake or whatever it is that you are making doesn't bake consistently. So I can already tell by the amount of stuff in here, this is not going to be a huge batch, which is perfect for us. There are 2 of us at home. So this is just going to be a nice little taste for us. Okay, so like I said, you might look at that and go, it's creamed. Nope, you need to go more. Well, while it is creaming, you need to add, let's see, butter, eggs, brown sugar, granulated sugar, and then vanilla. This calls for 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I might use a little bit more. Cheers. That's probably more like 4 teaspoons. And this is Mexican vanilla. This we purchased from a lady locally, but it comes actually from Mexico City. That is a good creamed butter right there. So you can see this is the stuff that was on the spatula from the last. And if you pick up what it looks like now, that's a good creamed sugar. That means that everything is incorporated really well. You're going to have a better bake. All right, so we have creamed our butter with the brown sugar, eggs, butter, vanilla. Then it says add flour, cinnamon, allspice, baking powder, soda, and salt. They say sift it together. I am not a sifter, but I have put 2 cups of flour in here. I'm going to go ahead and put my other spices in here, kind of mix them together a little bit with a fork. Same idea. I think old-fashioned recipes asked for sifting because when they were processed, you ended up with chunks. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my spices in here and stir them together. So it calls for, here's your 2 cups of flour, cinnamon, 1 teaspoon. So halved is half a teaspoon. Cinnamon goes a long way. Cinnamon, we are using really good Saigon cinnamon. That is probably the best of the best. Now, I'm a cinnamon person, so I'm going to put slightly more cinnamon in than it calls for. Saigon cinnamon has a richer, more aromatic flavor to it, and that's what we prefer. So cinnamon, a half a teaspoon. Where did my allspice go? Half a teaspoon of allspice. Okay, so that was half a teaspoon of cinnamon, maybe a little bit more than half. Half a teaspoon of that allspice that I talked about. It is ground as well, ground allspice. You just get that at the grocery store. It's very common. Less common in today's modern cooking, but you can find it at the grocery store, no problem. 1 teaspoon of soda and a half a teaspoon of salt. We are using fine grained sea salt, but wow, my teaspoon just came right off my ring. I guess that's another thing my husband can fix tonight. I don't know, I'll find something for you. 1 teaspoon of baking soda and a half teaspoon of baking powder. So the soda creates a reaction. The baking powder creates a rise, and with the combination of the two, you're going to get a fluff on your cookies, which is good because oatmeal is quite heavy. So that's why they're having you do both of those. Okay, so I believe that is all of our floury, our spices and stuff. So I'm going to combine that. It says for you to mix this into your butter, and then you are going to add oatmeal, and then you are going to add your chocolate chips and nuts if you would like. So I am going to slowly incorporate this. I'm going to put a little bit in, mix that in. And I do this a little at a time because, like I said, I am the queen of flinging stuff everywhere. And we've cleaned the kitchen a couple of times already today. My husband has been barbecuing. So the house smells like barbecue. It smells like heaven. But we've already wiped down kitchen a few times because anytime we do anything like that, it definitely gets everywhere. It doesn't matter how careful you are. Ends up everywhere. Alright, so there are our dry ingredients. And this is another time, scrape the bowl, because once you start adding dry ingredients, it is going to stick. And again, that's just that same problem. All of your ingredients are going to be incorporated the same, and it doesn't. Okay, so this is still very wet, but that's because we're adding oatmeal. This is a it's the Food Club brand, but you can use any kind. But the key is the old-fashioned oats, not the quick oats, the old-fashioned oats. Doesn't matter what brand you choose, as long as they are old-fashioned. And this calls for, how many? Where are my oats? Flour, butter, brown sugar, 2 cups. So 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of oats. 1, 2, and I was a little shallow on one of those, so I'm just going to put a tiny bit more in. Plus, as I've said before, I like vanilla a lot, and so I added a hair bit more vanilla, so I'm adding just a tiny bit more oats. I'm going to mix those in. I've also noticed that if you have a thicker batter, it gets stuck in your paddle. So I will drop my bowl down and spin that real fast, and it knocks some of that out. So that's quite a pretty little batter. Now, I think I've said this before. I don't like nuts. I'm allergic to some nuts, but let's be honest. We need some nuts in this, so I'm going to put a few in. So it calls for 1 cup of chopped nuts. I'm only going to do half-ish because I think you need some nuts in there, but I'm not willing to put that many in. Not my favorite. So this is my 1 cup, and I'm just going to fill it up. The other thing, and you guys are just going to have to kind of make a decision about this on your own. Some recipes called for 1 cup of nuts. One recipe will call for 1 cup of chopped nuts. Those are 2 very different things because, of course, 1 cup of nuts is going to break down into a considerable, so you're putting in a lot more nuts than if it calls for 1 cup of nuts. Does that make sense? So instead of chopping, because I'm lazy, we have discovered that if you put your nuts in a plastic bag and you use your kitchen hammer, mind you, I'm doing this on a cooling thing so I don't destroy my kitchen, but it chops them quite nicely. And you're not spending all this time. I remember sitting watching my mom. Did your mom do the same thing? And, as much as I appreciate the knife skills, I don't want to spend that much time. That's true. I don't know if you can hear my husband, but he says that releases the oils a little bit more too. So you're going to get an interesting flavor from them rather than just the crunch. Now, think about cleanup as well. I can just put that back in my little thing because it didn't actually touch food, and that was one of those cheap bags from the grocery store that you just put in the trash. Done and done. Now, the last thing that it calls for is M&Ms or chocolate chips. 1 pound, and I don't know what that translates into. So I'm just going to put M&Ms in until it looks good. That's true. These aren't M&Ms. These are chocolate chips. Oop. M&M down. Don't want the babies eating that. Huh? Chocolate chips. My KitchenAid is saying, I have had enough. Okay, so I'm shy on the nuts, but I'm not shy on the chocolate. That looks like a lovely batter. You can hear my KitchenAid groaning. It is a very thick, heavy batter. Our anniversary is coming up. Maybe I should ask my husband for a new KitchenAid. This one we actually got for our wedding. So it is 19 years old, coming up next month. So it does not owe us anything. Okay, so here is our batter. And if you look at it, it is very thick, very, very thick. But that's what you want from a Cowboy Cookie. Nice, hearty, thick, lovely batter. So the recipe says that you are supposed to drop onto a cookie sheet using a 1-inch round teaspoon per cookie and bake for 15 minutes at 350 degrees. I have already preheated my oven. If I can get little Ann, sweet pea, Mama needs one of these. Cookie! Oh my goodness! All right, cookie sheet. I prefer to use scoops simply because then you can keep all of your cookies consistent. It looks more, I mean, let's be honest, I'm just at home cooking for us. But if you were to do these for a party or for, to take for gifts or something like that, you end up with a more consistent. So because I like a good, hearty, healthy cookie. These might end up taking more than 15 minutes to cook just because they're quite large. This is a number 20 scoop. If you end up going to like a supply store or you get online to purchase one, this is a number 20 scoop. We use it for a lot of different things. When we cater and do things like that, it's a good sized scoop for a lot of different things. For cookies, these oatmeal cookies will spread out a little bit, but they're not going to spread out, at least in the past, they haven't spread out a long ways. So we'll see what happens today, because I've noticed that depending on weather and that kind of stuff, it's kind of a crapshoot. You get different results different times, but we have liked this size in the past. Okay, so got 12 cookies here on this cookie sheet. The recipe says 15 minutes. We're going to try it at 15 minutes for 15 minutes at 350. We're going to see how that goes. And I will let you know if we end up having to cook it for a little bit longer. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. All right, so these ended up being in the oven for 20 minutes, and I know it's because they're big. They're much bigger than they're supposed to be. The original recipe says that it's going to make about 250 cookies. I halved that, so it should have made 125 cookies, and I got 24. So they're much bigger than the recipe. Now, so these are not bite-sized. These are big, healthy, hearty meal cookies. They're huge, but they're beautiful. They are a little bit dark on the bottom. They're slightly crispy on top. You notice that they have cracked. I shouldn't say cracked. Well, cracked on the surface. They're not a smooth cookie. They shouldn't be a smooth cookie. So they've slightly cracked on the surface, and then the inside is going to be soft, which is exactly how I like my cookies. I personally like ginger snaps and stuff. I like the flavor of them, but I don't like a hard cookie. I'm not a milk drinker, so I'm not going to sit and dunk a cookie. So these are the type of cookies I like. So you can see that they're soft on the inside. They're coming off of the baking sheet really well. I know that's because we have a significant amount of butter in them. So I've got the other batch inside the oven right now. Again, these took about 20 minutes if you decide to make your cookies this size. Okay, so the actual recipe, the full recipe, which I have. So the original recipe, 4 cups of flour, 2 cups of butter, 2 cups of brown sugar, 2 cups of granulated sugar, 4 cups of oatmeal, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of allspice, 4 eggs. This says 1 pound of chocolate chips or M&Ms, your choice, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 1 cup of chopped nuts, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt. And then if you watch the video, you can see the order of things and how I did them. So, do you want to come taste test, my love?
Of course.
These are still warm from the oven. So you notice they soft. Those are not raisins. No raisins, no raisins. So they're a good texture. Crispy on the outside, soft on the inside.
Add extra vanilla with that cinnamon. Sure makes a big difference too.
A little bit more vanilla than it called for because I love vanilla. It's a Mexican vanilla, so it's got an earthy taste mixed with that Saigon cinnamon. It's a good combination. And as we were talking about that allspice, you hear the word spice and you think it's going to be spicy. It's not. It's a warming. Is that a good description? It's just a good, warm, homey feel. It's a great combination with the oatmeal. The oatmeal stayed in pieces because it's that old-fashioned stuff, but, you know, softened a little bit.
The nice thing about these too is they're dense without being heavy. So, you know, you get a good chewy cookie, and it's really got a lot of foundation to it, but you know, it doesn't weigh a whole bunch. So
even though it's a very large cookie, it's not super heavy. So that is our version of Cowboy Cookies. Like I said earlier, I know everybody's got slightly different. It's one of those cookies that your grandmothers used to make. This is our version. I would suggest you try it. It's a really good home feel, old-fashioned cookie that's got a great flavor. So, thanks for joining us for another episode of Fire, Flour, and Fur. You didn't get to see much of the fur kids today because they've been busy all day helping Daddy with barbecue and are tired. But another day, perhaps, we will do a training video. If you have any comments or would like to do some suggestions about maybe your Cowboy Cookies and what you do different, please comment below. And we look forward to seeing you again.